Are we going? Okay. Hello, everybody. Sayre Nova again, and let's see. We just before we get going, we had a great weekend racing down at New Jersey Motorsports Park with ARMA down in New Jersey. As you can see, I'm standing in front of a van, still unpacked, with my race stuff in it. We sold some hiding out tires. We talked to a lot of people about tires, and I'm still floating off that. So I had a great time. It's been like 5 days since, but as I haven't unpacked here, sometimes I just like to get a little dirty, stay a little dirty for a while, just enjoy it. So anyway, hi. Oh, did great. 2 seconds, 1/3 against very fast people and a track I had been to only once for a non-race before. So I was very happy with it. But going to ARMA is like going to school. People are just fast, fast, fast. So I just tried to keep up. And I beat one guy twice. So hey, what can I say? So today we have a, I would say very cool, kind of epic super bike. This, in a lot of ways, we've had similar bikes to this before. This, in a lot of ways, is the end of the line for the original generation of super bikes. This is a 1982 Kawasaki GPz 1100. Across the frame, inline four-cylinder, as the name suggests, 1100 cc's. And this is the son, stepson, grandson of the, let's go with son, one generation, or really kind of the same generation, as the Kawasaki Z1, the 900cc bike from 1972 that really blew the competition out of the water and changed, basically made Harley irrelevant, and the British and the Triumphs and Nortons really quake in their boots and soon also become irrelevant. So the original superbike era was the bikes of the 70s. They were powerful engines in chassis that did not really know how to keep up. The Japanese started making these four-cylinder bikes, known as the Universal Japanese Motorcycle, starting with the Honda CB750 in 1969, which I would say is the actual beginning of the major Japanese dominance. And what Kawasaki did is they saw Honda coming out with that. They had their own 754 planned, and they said, well, we got to do it better. So they came up with a double overhead cam 900, and that was the Z1, the mighty Z1. So so the Japanese were making these powerful engines, but the frames were just basically versions of what the British had already developed over the years, and other European manufacturers had already developed over the years of motorcycling, that were designed for engines that had 40 horsepower, 50 horsepower maybe, and you come up with these bikes that have 80 horsepower, 90 horsepower, and they really just challenged the limits of the frame, of the spindly forks, of the brakes that really were just early generation disc brakes at that point, and they were quite exciting to say the least. Flexi-flyer is a term that was used for a lot of these bikes from the 70s, and anyway, that brings us to this 1982. And we have the GPz 1100. It's packed with top-of-the-line tech for its time. You'll notice that we do not have carburetors here. These are very early throttle bodies, fuel injection systems. I believe it's the first production bike to use fuel injection. I think the CX500 Turbo came out later. I could be wrong about that if you know more about the CX500 Turbos, because those also had fuel injection right around this time. But I believe this is the first production bike to have it. Very abnormal for the time. Most production bikes didn't start using fuel injection until the 90s, and it wasn't really totally the norm until the aughts, well into this millennium, that we actually have most bikes be fuel injected out of the factory. So this is way ahead of its time for that. You have twin disc brakes up here, ventilated discs, twin discs, and honking big calipers. Single piston, which is pretty basic, but it's a big piston and has a lot of stopping power with a big friction area. And so it did its job. Cast wheels, heavy for modern times, but stiff and light enough for back in that day. But really, that's top of the line 70s tech, not top of the line 80s tech. So this, you can start to see that the bike is reaching the end of a certain development period. Disc in the back, that was pretty top of the line for then too. And otherwise you have a semi-digital dashboard up here with very 80s LCD displays for your fuel, a digital watch that looked like that, but pretty much otherwise very 80s stuff, not particularly technologically advanced now, but back then it sort of was. But the point about this bike is that right after this, we have the Honda Interceptor comes out, the 750 four-cylinder liquid cooled and completely different chassis, a chassis that goes around the frame instead of this cradle frame kind of chassis. This kind of plain steel, as I said, this dates, let me see if I find a round one here. You can see it's round tubing, heavy steel. It's fine for a bike that's not getting ridden at speed, but once you start putting stuff into it, it twists a ton. And so we get into the later kind of chassis that use box section, which is stiffer, square tubing essentially, and actually kind of wrap around the engine instead of going around, wrap around the sides of the engine instead of going around it, and holds everything much stiffer. So right after this, a year 83, I think. Oh geez, gonna help me out. Have to help me out there. I'm not rattling off these numbers perfectly. 84, I know was I think the first generation of the Interceptor, but 83 might have been one. They had definitely had it in development by that point. And it's a completely different thing. Tons of power, a V4, which is different, liquid cooling, and completely different style of wheels, smaller wheels. These are still 19 front, 18 rear. The Interceptor had 17 rear, I think, and a 16 front. And you get into wider, bigger profiles. The brakes get improved, and it's just a different world. So, and then right after that, 85, 86, you come out with the Suzuki GSXR 750, which really changed the game. Well, actually, in 84, you have the GPz 900, which cameraman Todd has one, a very beautiful one, similar color scheme. The bike from Top Gun that Tom Cruise rides in Top Gun. And that was also a game-changing motorcycle as far as it being the next generation of really 80s super bikes. So that's kind of interesting, is that this was really the end of the line. It's an 82, but this really represents the best of 70s technology. So that being said, it's very similar to the Eddie Lawson replica. We've done one of those, ELR. We have a green one in here that we've talked about. And that was based on the late 70s, early 80s superbike racing. So it's dated even in its time, but it was a fast machine, packed with the best of what there was. So yeah, chime in the comments about this kind of era, this transition from these big honking across the frame fours to the other big honking across the frame fours with different frames, and most especially my favorite, the Interceptor with a V4. This bike in particular is in here. It's a new purchase for the person, and I kind of like that. It's always a little bit of a mystery. We never know what somebody bought, and we have buyer beware out there. We have had people buy some really beautiful looking machines on auctions and bring them to us, and the bike has to be gone through again completely. Things that were just really clearly put together to be, it's not borderline scam. It is a scam. They're put together, just don't work. This I don't think was that case. I'm just talking in general about what we see when you're buying stuff. I like that this bike has not been restored. It's got some patina on it, got some crazing on the tank back here, or the paint back here. Tank has some chips. It's clearly a bike that was ridden and used and maintained enough that it's not falling apart. It's in very decent shape, but it's not perfect. And when I see something that's too perfect, I get alarm bells that go off all over the place, because my experience has been that the most perfect bikes tend to have the most mechanical problems. The engine was not a high priority, for example, or the wheel bearings or the forks or anything that is not cosmetic was not taken care of, because they just want it to look good. They didn't care about how it rode. Those bikes can be very expensive. So this one so far is looking good for us. It does run. His complaints about it are relatively minor. There's some smoking on decel when you close the throttle. That can be valve guides or valve guide seals. Either way, to do that, you're pulling the head. And this time of year, we're peak season right now. We're not going to get into any engine work this time of year. So what our process would be to diagnose it and then say, okay, if that's what it needs, come back when it's a little cooler. We'll go through it, see what else it needs while we're in there. And by the time next year comes around, he'll have a smoochless bike, as some say. Well, so far, this is actually my first look. We just pulled it out and I fired it up just to see what it sounded like. So this will be a real-time thing. So far, I see some leaking fork seals here. And this is the kind of thing where something like that wouldn't necessarily tell me I had to rebuild the forks, but this is on this fork over here. It is enough that that's going to not be good. Bikes that have been parked for a while, the fork seals will actually dry out a little bit, and you might see a little oil when you start to use it again, but it can actually often swell back up again and reseal. So if it's just a little bit, I take a wait and see approach. If it's that much, that's not going to come back. So we will want to rebuild those forks, and while we're in there, check the bushings on them to make sure that everything is not loose. Loose bushings can cause your forks to leak, just as a side point. Fork seals alone don't do all the sealing because if the bushing won't hold, Any good seal will still be just getting pushed out of the way by the play and the fork. So a proper full rebuild is always best, and we'll give it that there. The chain, this has one of those big, annoying, expensive, and unnecessary 630 chains. That was a thing at this time period. Most common thing to do for these, the chain itself is so expensive because they're used so little. The economy of scale isn't there for it. So what we often do on these is do a conversion to a 530. It costs almost, the front and rear sprocket and the new chain costs almost the same as one of those 630 chains. And they actually give you a little horsepower because that's heavy and a ton of drag on it. And I think that's even a 630 O-ring, which is going to be the most dragged, most high drag chain you can possibly put on there. But, he doesn't necessarily need it. So the question becomes, what does he want to do with it? Always a conversation we have with anybody on an old machine is, what is your goals here? Because if you're just going to ride it down to get coffee on a Sunday morning, that chain will last you for another 5 years, I'm sure. The brakes feel okay. There was no dragging as I pushed it, so I'm not too worried about that. We have cosmetic stuff, the boot cracking there. There's paint coming off around that master cylinder's cover. That's kind of normal for a bike that's been, especially one that's been sitting. The heat cycles will often push vapor through there. This has been used for a while or tightened for a while. I'm not sure we're going to repair that stuff. I see some paint coming off down here on the foot pegs, foot peg bracket as well. Again, that's the least of our priorities here. So we're going to start off with doing full mechanical stuff. I'll inspect the brake pads and sort of get an eyeball on them from here, but I need to get, yeah, they got plenty of life in the brake pads. So I probably won't do anything there. We'll check the rear ones. But what I don't see is crazy oil leaks. I don't see anything that's, I said that and then I take it back. It's not been dripping on the ground, but now they're looking closer. Yeah, we do have a crazy oil leak. So we're going to source that up here. Now, worst case scenario is that would be a head gasket, because that's it means you got to pull it to fix, but I don't, given from where it is, what we do is we trace the path of the oil up, and it keeps going above the head to cylinder seam, and we're coming up, yeah, we got some here. These tubes, these passageways will leak here. These will leak here. The oil that runs up and down this part of the engine runs up, not down. Those often can become leak points. So those there, and then the gasket surface itself here looks to be, that was not terrible. So,
never seen.
Yeah. Okay. This is a great idea. Todd's pointing out, not great idea, a great example. Somebody over tightened this. This is not supposed to do that. This is supposed to stay flat, and that happens when you're a little ham-fisted, perhaps a little overexcited, or the header wasn't seated properly. So we may take that off and straighten it and try to get that better. But yeah, so we do see some oil leaks. It's not uncommon for old bikes to leak oil, as I'm sure most of you know. These bikes in particular, top end leaks are very common. The ELR we had in here, we had the valve cover off 3-4 times before we got it to stop leaking, just because we had to get all the imperfections right, and you got to get the torque down properly, got to get a good gasket. The cheap gasket will often just not work at all. And yeah, so oil leaks is number one. Checking inside the fuel tank.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, we look for rust in there. That can be a big problem. A, you can get a hole in the tank from the rust, or B, it gets sucked into your fuel system and clogs up everything and gives you bad running. The rear shocks, just like the front forks, these are basically tiny little shocks. We'll look on the shaft for any oil leak stuff. I don't see it there. Rear shocks tend to last a very long time on motorcycles because they just don't get that much abuse, and the bike itself doesn't have many miles on it. 26,000, very much nothing on one of these. But if this customer said I want to make this into a daily rider, or I want to ride across country on it, or I'm very brave and I want to take this beautiful vintage machine to a track day and run it on the track at speed, we'd recommend new shocks, and some work on the front end. So and probably a little bit of better brake shoes, brake pads, stuff like that, to really upgrade. So you're not dealing with suspension that was iffy at best back in the day and is 40 years old now. But these look fine as far as initial inspection for general use. And if they don't feel bad when we ride it, I wouldn't worry too much about it for what the bike will probably be used for. So yeah, let's give it a little sound here. Now, Kerker pipe, 1970s, early 80s, cream of the crop as far as what was being used on these super bikes. Somebody pulled the baffling out of this one. or severely modified. It's probably a race baffle, actually, now that I'm looking in there. So there is baffling, but it's definitely a race baffle because it is loud as shit, as the kids say. So, see what it sounds like. Ooh. Come on. So, looking at that, what we're seeing come out of the pipe there, I'm seeing black smoke, which is interesting. That says to me it's not an oil burning issue up here. It's a jetting, or excuse me, I'll quote jetting in quotes. It's a fuel system issue. It's giving it, the system's giving it too much fuel. That's a sign of it being too rich. So I bet if we pulled the plugs, they would also be black and carbon, close to carbon fouled, not quite fouled because they're working. And something interesting, the customer told us that they modified the sensors on the fuel injections. I don't know the system that well to know the actual name of the parts, so I'll call it the throttle position sensor just for lack of a better term. Because they wanted to stop the popping on decel that the Kerker was making. Now, this kind of a Kerker pretty much always will pop on decel because it's made for higher RPM and wider open throttle opening. So when you close the throttle, everything gets lean and it starts popping. Just little minor backfires. It's part of the charm, but he didn't like it, so he modified it to not do that. Probably enriching it and probably over enriching the whole thing. So we probably have to go back in and adjust that. These are not really adjustable in the same way that carbs are. So I would say don't mess with that if you have one of these. But we might do a follow-up and tell you what we find and how we fix that. Because just looking at that, the customer's complaint was thinking it was burning oil, and I can tell right away that's not oil. So yeah, that's what we get with a first look. So I'm looking at this for the first time, as you guys are, and yeah, as I said, chime in with thoughts and memories of these things, this era. If you watch these videos, you know I love the superbike era from the late 60s throughout the 70s. And then I consider this a 70s bike, even though it's an 82. Really the end of it. There wasn't much after this that kept going with this lineage. Everything kind of changed and became the next generation that we know as a GPz 900 and the VFR 750 and then the GSX-R 750. So, and I'm going to forget about the Yamahas for now. So yeah, thanks for watching. Chime in with your input, and we will see you next time.
Thanks for watching.